back to Frankly Speaking. Tonight, we're doing a reaction video to Michael Matt of The Remnant discussing apparently the new phenomenon of Catholic anti-Semitism in America.
Here we go again. Only this time, the Catholic Church really is not going to be able to do much. The Synodal Church, can you imagine appealing to the Synodal Church in the middle of a world war? Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. What a nightmare. You know, and it's getting worse, because I thought maybe by now they might start waking up. We're in the middle of a world war. We just got off COVID when they shut the whole world down. They locked up all the churches, and the bishops are like, okie dokie. Well, okay, sacraments next year, son, right? I thought maybe the bishops had learned something, but apparently not. They're still terrified. They're still hiding in the upper room for fear of the Jews, evidently.
Yeah, I think Matt is right here. I think the bishops, from what I've seen, have been affected by, I guess, our political times, political correctness, and this is what drives a lot of the problems within the church. He'll go on to explain a little bit better than I can, and but I do get it, especially in the wake of COVID and all the other scandals we've had, you know, dealing with the federal government over the past 30, 40, 50 years, going all the way back to the 60s and MK Ultra. It's about time we learn that there's nefarious forces that are pushing a lot of these issues, and that we as Catholics have to be brave.
Because they're already now. Holy Week is still a couple weeks out. And our good bishops from the USCCB are already trotting out that weird, bizarre little annual lecture, homily, that tells Catholics to knock it off with the anti-Semitism. They're actually doing it again.
Sadly, the celebration of Easter has at times been the occasion for outbursts of hatred and even violence against Jews. The Catechism of the Council of Trent teaches that the Jews do not bear the collective guilt for the death of Jesus. The Church made this teaching explicit at the Second Vatican Council in Nostra Aetate. It is also one of the causes of a great deal of the hatred for the Jewish people that we have seen in history and continue to see today. As Catholics, we are called to walk in the truth, and so to reject the conspiracies and lies that lead to harassment and even violence against our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Now, here's the scary thing, friends. That's a good bishop. We all know Bishop Sample. Good guy. He was sort of friendly to the traditional mass over the years. Good man. He's not some crazy Blaze Supich, right? One of the better bishops, which almost makes this worse. Because really, think about it. What is Bishop? What is His Excellency Bishop Sample? What's he talking about? What's he really getting at? You remember that old kind of a joke-loaded question? So, Stan, are you still beating your wife? Remember that one? It's a fallacy because it embeds an unverified, damaging assumption within the question itself, so you really can't answer. That's what I was reminded of when I listened to Bishop Sample's little presentation, which is nothing new. They do this every year. It, too, embeds an unverified and damaging assumption. What are we talking about? Where is all of this anti-Semitism among faithful, serious Catholics? And if they're just nut jobs on YouTube, who cares? They're nut jobs on YouTube. They don't warrant all of this, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the big question here, is that the frustrating part, at least for me, is that we never really get a definition of what anti-Semitism is. And number two, names are really never given as to who's being charged with this grave sin, supposedly, of anti-Semitism. As I said to you guys here before, while I have my objective critiques of Jews, but I also have objective critiques of our Protestants and the Black community and my own Italian community, you know, we have to differentiate between what is true discrimination and what is simply objective critiques. For my part, as I've told you guys before on this channel, my wife is half ethnically Jewish. Does that make me an anti-Semite when I critique Jews in an objective manner, based upon what I see, based off the principles of truth and justice? I don't think that's anti-Semitism. It's just that definition by certain Jewish activist groups like the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center not only extend out this definition of anti-Semitism to anybody who has any critiques of, you know, Israel and their foreign policy, but even more so, it's like they're using a political baton to silence people. And this is the problem that people have. One, what is anti-Semitism? And can you give me an example of this? And the good bishop here, Bishop Sample, who is a good bishop, I wish he would have gave us more clarity on what he was referring to.
Because obviously, think about this. From the perspective of the world, they're not paying much attention to religion anymore. There's an understatement. But they're just kind of like flip on the news, maybe, you know, watch a podcast or something. They say, what's this? Oh, Bishop Sample's out there. What's he got to say?
Sadly, the celebration of Easter has at times been the occasion for outbursts of hatred and even violence against Jews.
Obviously, when they see a powerful conservative bishop, he's taking time away from a church in chaos, friends. Massive sex scandal involving kids worldwide, church closings, mass apostasy, plunging mass attendance numbers, right? And now even world war in the Holy Land. In the middle of all that, this rather powerful American bishop and a conservative bishop, Bishop Sample, thinks that despite it all, what has to happen right now, I got to give these guys a sermon. I got to give the Catholic world, my entire flock, give them a sermon that Catholic anti-Semites are still so prevalent, so plentiful, and pose such a serious threat right now that I need to go out there and basically accuse all Catholics of being guilty of this sin of hatred and anti-Semitism, right? Because it's a classic thing. He doesn't identify his target. He doesn't tell us who he's talking about. So that means it's all of us that he's talking about. We're all guilty. We all must be guilty of Jew hatred in a big way to warrant a dramatic statement like this. It's just open-ended and doesn't even identify anyone. Man, that must be everybody, the Catholic world, just full of haters.
It's also one of the causes of a great deal of the hatred for the Jewish people that we have seen in history and continue to see today.
If you don't understand, Your Excellency, how the other side's going to run with this, how you've made their day, how you're carrying water for them, well then listen up. Because they've been trying to get you guys to do this for a long, long time. You see, because for them, for the radical secular folks, especially the Zionists, it's the church herself, the Catholic Church herself, that is the problem. Not some random nutty guy on YouTube. It's the church herself. And that random nutty guy, of course, he's just a holdover from 1,965 years of Catholic hatred. Because the church herself...
And I think that's the disappointing part about all of this, is that the good bishop doesn't give names, he doesn't give examples, and I wish he would have clarified. And I'm not here to throw a bishop under the bus, and maybe he has some concrete answers or explanations to what he's saying. The hard part for me here is that he's also presuming that all of the historical confrontations between Jews and Catholics is somehow the fault of Catholics, when in fact Jews and Catholics have always clashed historically. I know in a post-modern world, in a post-liberal world where we're supposed to throw away our religious differences for indifference, ironically enough, we've tried to sort of quash these, what do you want to call it, these religious differences. And all it's done is throw the world into chaos, into a world of indifference. And even in the midst of all this indifference, it hasn't killed off, or it hasn't fended off the religious differences. And now we're in a war in the Middle East over Christian Zionism, where you have a radical group of Christian Zionists that have been pushing us to go to war in the Middle East now since the 19th century, when this 19th century heresy was founded. And so for the bishop here, I want to give him a chance to give us those examples. I'm not here to throw any bishops under the bus, but it does seem a little questionable, and maybe it seems like he's pandering to the political dialogue of the day, which puts a lot of pressure on people to simply oppose what is happening in the Middle East with this foreign policy, with this disordered relationship between America and the current administration in DC, with Israel. It's a completely disordered relationship. A lot of Americans, including Catholics, are asking questions. And it seems like even this is now considered anti-Semitism.
The traditional church is the problem. The traditional liturgy is the problem. You see? They've been doing this. The church, her teaching, her traditional liturgy, as the Anti-Defamation League claims, it's all anti-Semitic. Her hateful New Testament, oh my gosh, just ask Mel Gibson about that. ADL, once again, the hateful narrative of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It's responsible for the pogroms, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah, and notice how the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center will say, hey, the Catholic Latin Mass, that's a ground for anti-Semitism. But yet, when Catholics bring up the idea of the Greater Israel Project and this idea that these wars in the Middle East are for a sort of a religious Jewish movement, somehow that's conspiracy theory. The Catholics have to deal with being called bigoted and anti-Semites, while when we confront them on their sins or their religious crusades, that's simply considered conspiracy theory. It's a double standard, and I wish the good bishop would have addressed that.
All down through history. It's the Bible itself that's hate literature. But most importantly, Your Excellency, and anyone else who might be listening, it's the Catholic Church's dogmatic religious supremacism that's the problem. Bishop Sampo, do you realize this? That's what they're after here, and you're just complying. You're playing right into their hands. It's the supremacism which teaches that Christ established one true church, outside of which there is no salvation.
And that's why the Kerry Prigine Bowler incident with that, what was it, that religious liberty panel that Donald Trump put together, that was so revealing, because she simply asked the question, I'm Catholic. We're not allowed to be Zionist. It's not part of our theology. But if I reject Zionism, does that make me an anti-Semite? And of course, the answer from the panel was yes. She put them on the spot. Donald Trump, or who's there in charge of that panel, ultimately the buck stops at the top. Donald Trump kicks her off the panel, which indicated what? It indicated that unless Catholics accept the idea of Zionism, then somehow they are bigoted, which effectively means that in this country now, Catholics have lost their religious liberty. Either we conform to the Zionist beliefs that they get to impugn their religious values on us, and if we don't do that, we're bigots. Again, Catholics don't have religious liberty in this country anymore. That's what Donald Trump's, again, panel on religious liberty proved. That's why it was such a scandal, and why the Catholic world was outraged by it, because now we're being forced to bend the knee to another religion that we don't believe in. Again, that is a direct assault on American religious liberty.
That's the target. That's the hate. I just refuse to accept the Bishop Sample that you're referring to that. But how did you miss that then? How did you miss that that is their agenda? Because that's what the American Jewish Committee, for example, that's what they say. They came right out a couple of years ago on the anniversary of Nostra Aetate and said, yeah, the Catholic Church has finally stopped hating the Jews. And here's where they came right out and said, and right out and admitted that that's their problem. We are a hate group. We are haters. Admit it, Catholics, or you're anti-Semites. You confirm your anti-Semitism if you don't accept what we say about your church.
Nostra Aetate reversed nearly 2,000 years of Christian hostility towards Jews and Judaism.
Okay, stop right there. What I said earlier, right? That this confrontation between Jews and Catholics have happened for a long time. It's just a reality of history, because we have two opposite polar views, right? We don't believe in, again, a dual covenant as Catholics. But notice here the presumption here by this particular Jewish group, and that is that, of course, this confrontation that Jews and Catholics have had for 2,000 years, it's all the fault of Catholics. Nothing Jews ever do has been wrong historically, and so we Catholics have to take the blame. That is the presumption of the speaker right here.
That had led to centuries of violence, ghettos, inquisitions, expulsions, and forced conversions.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
I want to stress this, friends. I don't like piling on. I don't like going after bishops that are decent, better than some of the crazy apostate, heretic ones. Bishop Sample's not a heretic. Bishop Sample's a good man. And I truly appreciate his fidelity to orthodoxy, his efforts to remain tradition-minded, right? Even when it comes to the traditional Latin Mass over the years. But I would say that His Excellency, what are you talking about? Why are you carrying water for this liberal, radical Christophobia? I don't get it. And again, as I said earlier, who are these nameless, faceless Catholics that present such a threat to our Jewish brothers that you need to publicly chastise them? I don't think they exist. So I have to ask, what is the actual agenda here? Do people who talk like this, do they realize? Because EWTN did it not too long ago, the same dang thing. Oh, the Catholic Church is very anti-Semitic. We're trying to get over that now. Give us a little more time. Don't they?
Yeah, this is the guilt complex, the post-World War II guilt complex that the West has had to deal with for the past 80 years, because the presumed Holocaust narrative that we've been given was the fault of Christians, because many of the Germans were baptized. That's the argument that they've made. I think here Michael is going to point that out. And of course, it's much more nuanced than that. Obviously, a historical event that's so tragic, we're not allowed to talk about it in a nuanced sense to really understand what happened at historical event. As people are being thrown in prison, but that is sort of the baton that is used to hold everybody hostage, to make everybody feel guilty. And while certainly we should condemn the perpetrators of that terrible historical event, it's always, again, in America, it's fair game to talk about all these things and to understand it in a proper context. In Europe, 17 countries, they decide to throw you in jail. But here, it's more like you can't talk about this particular topic in polite company. And it seems to me that the good bishop may be falling prey to this. I hope I'm wrong. I'm not trying to judge his heart or his mind. But like Michael Matt says here, a lot of this doesn't make sense. Why the good bishop will go down this path, especially without giving names and examples.
They realize how this offers comfort to so many truly Christophobic enemies of the Catholic Church. So I would say, Your Excellency, please stop it. I mean, don't you see? No wonder the Catholic Church today stands powerless in her human element, in the face of this massive sexual revolution, a transsexual revolution that's affecting children and families, in fact, bringing about the breakup of the Christian family. No wonder. You guys don't have any influence. You have no throw weight anymore because of this kind of thing. We're very sorry that we are a hateful organization. We're going to try. Who would listen to you and why? Where is your denunciation of the Christophobia that we as parents live through every day? The churches, the Christian moral teaching that's under assault everywhere, from the back of cereal boxes to music to movies, everywhere. Christophobia on brash and wild display. Don't you think the bishops during Holy Week, as Holy Week preachers, might come out and say, the Christophobia has got to stop. The hatred of Christ, the hatred of the Catholic Church, the hatred of the unborn, the hatred of the church's Christian moral theology has to stop.
And look at what's happening now, not only in Gaza and the Palestine region, but what's happening now in Lebanon, where you still have 40% of the population, which is Christian over there. They're being attacked over there. We know the one priest was died on a double tap strike by Israel, murdering the priest while he was going into the church, the blown up church, to help his flock. And yet not one word of outrage by the mainstream media or anybody else that doesn't find, again, the story useful. The fact is that Catholics are the most persecuted group on the planet today and have been for a long time. It's just that we don't play the victim game, right? We never have. And not that the world would listen anyways, and maybe that's part of the issue right there. But the Christophobic sort of world we live in now, the anti-Catholic world we live in now, it's on full display. And while we're being attacked, we're being punched in the face, we're being called anti-Semites or bigots or haters at the same time. It is a remarkable dynamic what we're going through as Catholics right now.
Because in lieu of that, no wonder abortion is getting worse every day and gay marriage and everything. And no wonder when even the church's own bishops are out there making it very clear that the Catholic Church has really no moral authority upon which to stand or speak because she's so lame, she's so useless, and most importantly, she is so hateful that her members all need a lecture from her bishops every year at Holy Week, admonishing them to stop hating an entire race of people that's probably, by the way, responsible for the Holocaust. The Church herself is responsible for the Holocaust.
The Holocaust was overwhelmingly a Jewish tragedy, but it was substantially a Christian scandal. Why was it a Christian scandal? Because it was perpetrated by overwhelmingly baptized Christians in ostensibly Christian lands. Of course, the Shoah was, as Pope Benedict XVI has described it, a pagan enterprise. But it couldn't have succeeded to the degree it did with the extermination of 6 million Jews if the land had not been tilled over centuries with what was called the teaching of contempt.
So what do you think, Bishop Sample? Do you think the rabbi there has a point?
Yeah, because here's the thing. I've been a Catholic my whole life. Most of the people that I know and associate with are Catholics. There is no anti-Semitic meetings we go to. There is no anti-Jewish meetings or clans or groups that the church has established. Our Lord taught us to love everybody. Love was the key to the Gospels, even Jews. And of course, this is a message that gets mixed up and twisted around in modern political times. And of course, the rabbi there wants to blame Christians, of course, for that Holocaust, which is outrageous. Again, a Holocaust that we're not allowed to really talk about. We just have to take the guilt for that, and that's fine. But I would ask the good rabbi, what about the Holodomor? What about the Armenian genocide? Who were the victims there? Christians. Who were the perpetrators there? Well, I think we know.
The church has been the problem all along, right? With all due respect, Your Excellency, such Episcopal bootlicking is a scandal, especially when Christianity is under fire everywhere, and like no other religion in the world suffers persecution. It is the #1 target in the world.
Sadly, religious freedom, especially for Christians, is under attack across the globe, including in the West, including right here in the United States, whether insidiously in the form of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that block Christians from employment and advancement opportunities, or overtly, like vandalism against churches, or in some parts of the world, murderous violence against Christians themselves. In terms of sheer numbers, and this is a fact often ignored, Christians are by far the most persecuted religious group in the world.
Oh my gosh, the anti-Semitism has to stop. That's like hiding your own Easter eggs. It's like spinning plates. It's completely out of touch with the reality. I mean, if you won't listen to me, Bishop Sample, listen to the poor Latin patriarch, Cardinal Pizzaballa. He's over there in the Holy Land right now dodging bombs that Israel's sending in, blowing everything up over there. He's right now in the homeland of the earliest Christian community in the world, and it's getting blown to hell by secular Jewish Zionist state. And here's Bishop Sample, we need to stop hating on the Jews.
Exactly. And I believe that the Christian population in the Palestine region is down to 2%. That's it, 2%. And like I said, now they get after Lebanon, and the Christians in that region are being bombed the hell out of over there as the churches are being attacked. And like I said, the double tap murder of a Catholic priest, no outrage at all from the secular world, none at all. Only we Catholics highlight, and of course, because nobody pays attention to the Catholics anymore, because like Matt points out, things have happened, of course. Nobody mentions this, right? No outrage, no worldwide condemnation, no apologies for the Catholics. We just have to take it. It is what it is. It's like the neocons will tell us, well, it's a byproduct of war. Nothing you could do about it. An unfortunate tragedy. Yeah, we're not buying it.
Of course we do. We don't hate the Jews, but the point is, why is that the big thing to do this Holy Week? To talk about that when it's the Christians who are dying.
That the persecution of Christians remains one of the most widespread human rights crises today, affecting over 380 million believers worldwide. they suffer high or extreme levels of discrimination, violence, and oppression because of their faith.
You know, and I'll close with this. I always find it so frustrating when we're supposed to sit there and beat our breasts and talk about how terrible the Catholic Church was. It's, this is just such a hateful organization. I can't even believe it. I'm so glad we grew up after Nostra Aetate. Oh boy, after the Second Vatican Council. Yeah, we finally grew up.
Yeah, and look at all the historical criticism that the church has received, from the Inquisition to the Protestant revolts, the religious wars of the medieval times, to, of course, taking the guilt, or the blame, I should say, for the Holocaust itself. Most of that, in fact, I would argue all of it, is lies and slander against the church and Catholics, and yet nobody ever apologizes to us. And when we try to contextualize it, either it's ignored and people don't care, because, again, those that are persecuted don't write the history books, right? But at the end of the day, Catholics have faced all this discrimination and all this slander and all these lies and all this libel, and yet nobody cares. We're supposed to care about everybody else that claims to be slandered and libeled, but not the Catholics. It is a clear double standard.
Never any reference, any mention to what the church actually accomplished. Because, as we've talked about down here before, the Catholic Church built the greatest civilization in the history of the world, which included missionary activity that went to the four corners of the earth to bring the light of Christ to Jesus, to feed people, to clothe the naked, right, to give drink to the thirsty, to educate the peoples of the world. The greatest system of justice and jurisprudence comes about because of the Catholic Church's social teaching. I wonder why they never mention that. The greatest body of theology and philosophy and the arts ever. The Catholic Church invented the hospital system worldwide. As I always say, look it up. It's a fantastic story. The Catholic Church literally invented the hospital.
Yeah, and this is where we get the concoction of Judeo-Christian values that is concocted right after World War II. Now, the Catholic Church, we know the history. It built the West. It gave us the hospitals, the university systems, everything we have. Hey, pretty much it's Rome, baby. It's always been Rome. It wasn't the Protestants. It wasn't the Jews. It was the Catholics that built the West. And the West really should be, at least Catholics should be given that credit, but of course we're not. Now, this is where I'll give Jews some credit. Jews are a very high Q race, and they have excelled in the West by doing great things like getting into many of the professions and climbing up sort of the upper echelons of civic society, because they're such a smart and ingenuitive people, and I will give them credit. But in terms of the foundations of the West, that was completely Catholic. And yet we're thrown under the bridge for that, because in the post-Enlightenment world where all of that was turned upside down, an old world that always looked up to heaven, that was much more well-ordered in terms of the natural law and the moral law, here comes the Enlightenment. Now all of a sudden it turns all that away to focus more on the material dialectic, and look what's happened to the West under secular governance. And that is the absolute collapse of morality and culture and family and all the despot kind of cultures and societies that we have created, that's fallen apart now by the second.
The Catholic Church literally invented higher education. The Catholic social teaching is the bedrock of little things like the Magna Carta. The Catholic Church historically is the patroness of the greatest artisans in the history of man. The greatest musicians, the greatest painters, sculptors, you name it. Greatest poets. Her nuns, an army of her little beautiful nuns, sisters, went again to the four corners of the world and built the school system, oftentimes helping to found cities like New Orleans and Quebec up in Canada. We've done stories on that and videos on that. The Catholic Church's missionaries founded the great cities of the world. You could go on and on and on, Bishop Sample, talking about the accomplishments of this church, not only for the souls of millions and millions and millions of people, what the mystical body of Christ through the Catholic Church has done, but also what she did for humanity. You can talk about so many beautiful things to make Catholics proud again, especially at Holy Week. Make them proud of what the Catholic Church has accomplished. Make them want to be like that army of saints who are now the church triumphant with God in heaven.
And I love this message by Michael Mapp because he's absolutely right. We Catholics are so browbeat with guilt and the apologies we have to give historically, when in fact I don't believe there's a whole lot of apologies we have to give, considering, like I said, we built the West. But where is the positive message to pat Catholics on the back for the great faith, the great culture, the great civilization that we built? And it's one thing when it comes from the secular world, the Christophobic world that hates Jesus Christ. I get that. But what about our bishops? What about our bishops? Why don't our bishops, give us a pat on the back as Catholics, because we deserve that. We need that comfort. We need that encouragement. And yet sometimes it seems like our own church is against us. And I think this whole claim of anti-Semitism, again, whether the good bishop sees something legitimate or not. Again, I would love to see him give more details about what he means, but this is something that is ultimately designed to dispirit us Catholics even further in a pagan world where we've gone completely mad, where the last, remnant of Christianity is fading away. The faith, the culture, the family, everything is collapsing in the West because of this secular liberalism that took over 200 years ago. And where is the church to come to our defense? The last remnant, those of us that are holding on to the last vestiges of our great faith, where are they? It seems like in some cases, they're being politically pressured to throw in with the other side. And that's very discouraging, very dispiriting for us Catholics.
And yet, once again, as Holy Week approaches, the message of, I would argue, one of the most inept classes of Catholic bishops in the history of the church is out there saying, hey, everybody, let's stop hating the Jews. This is diabolical. We don't hate the Jews, Excellency, and you know we don't. It's right in our catechism, isn't it? Jesus Christ, it's right in our scripture from the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Mary Magdalene, St. John, all the people at the foot of the cross, what do you think they were, Swedes? You cannot be serious, Excellency. The Catholic Church taught us to love all men, especially the beautiful Bible stories, the friends of Jesus, the daughters of Jerusalem, Mary Magdalene, Veronica. We grew up on those stories. Nobody taught us to hate the Jews. Nobody hates the Jews. It's a black legend. Maybe some small-minded little men somewhere had it in their head to say nasty things. Who cares? They're small-minded little men. And again, what about the rank Christophobia that is responsible for, you see it every day, responsible for church burn. How many churches burned up in Canada over the past few years? Hundreds of churches burned to the ground. Whole cathedrals over in France and other countries in Europe burning. Priests being attacked at the altars. Killed, murdered, slaughtered. The church dying. These bishops, they're big on synodality, aren't they? Well, listen to this, Excellencies. Stop embarrassing Holy Mother Church with your cringy little woke lectures, the target of which is a straw man invented by the Anti-Defamation League and people like that who have been steeped in Christophobia, in my opinion, if it's okay to point that out. Please, Your Excellency, can we just go back to being Catholic again? Can we do that? Can we just teach the faith again? Because teaching the faith makes it so people cannot be haters and still remain faithful followers of Jesus Christ. If you follow Jesus Christ, you are by definition opposed to any form of blood hate. He is love. You want to follow him, you better love, or you're not following him at all. So what are you doing over there, Excellency? Bombs are going off in the Holy Land, what John Paul called the mass apostasy. The church is literally dying.
Bingo. Bingo with Michael Matt. He called it absolutely right on this one here. Again, I've been Catholic my whole life. Never once have I been taught to hate Jews. Not once. We have been taught to love everybody, Jews and Protestants and, people of different races and cultures and ethnicities. The difference, of course, with we Catholics is that we have a standard of right and wrong, good and evil. And our duty is to call out sin when we see sin. And I think that's what bothers a lot of people, including many Jews, that they don't like to live by our standard. And of course, it gets back to the idea of assimilation and how and why Christian cultures and Jewish cultures have clashed in the past. Because at some point we have to have a shared common value. There has to be some forms of assimilation. And when these two groups oftentimes have met historically, they have clashed in terms of values and morality. And this is what we're trying to get at. And many of the things you see, the critiques of the Jewish community is based upon the sins that we as Catholics see that we believe is going to be a problem in terms of culture and society and everything that's gone in the West. Not that Catholics are perfect, not that Catholics that don't sin, but at least we have a certain standard, right? Even if we take, I don't know, who would you call the biggest anti-Semite if you want to go that? Let's play that game. Is it Nick Fuentes? But is Nick Fuentes really an anti-Semite? Nick Fuentes has Jewish friends. Nick Fuentes really doesn't have a problem with Jews per se. He has a problem with certain elements of our society where Jews have embedded themselves that have caused our Christian society to be undermined at some point. Is that wrong to say that? It's like when we look at the black community, for example, and we see all the social disorders there, right? The broken family in the black community that leads to rampant crime and drug use and all kinds of other dysfunctions. Is it wrong to critique what has happened in the black community in America? 20 years ago, the political right was terrified to bring these things up. But in a day of social media, with the rise of groups like the Groypers and Gen Z, we got now something called black fatigue that has hit the American society, American culture. All of a sudden now it's okay to call out the sins of the black community. Just like, guess what? It's okay to call out the sins of the white community or the Asian community, depending on what's going on in the society, right? Because collective judgment is a real thing. I know conservatives don't like to talk about collectivism in any kind of way because they're so focused on individualism. But in the end, God does make collective judgments. Can we call fair and foul within the realm of all communities equally? Yeah, I think we can, whether it's my tribe or your tribe or the black tribe or the Jewish tribe or the Asian tribe or the, what have you. I think it's fair to say, look, these are the sins of this group. This is where this group excels, but this is where this group struggles. And that's what a lot of people don't like, is that they get to dictate the terms and conditions to we Catholics that have a certain moral standing, right, that we uphold. Again, give me an example of Catholic anti-Semitism, something very concrete, something very definitive. It doesn't exist. Like I said, there's no social clubs or movements within the Catholic Church that purposely teaches anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews. We Catholics are taught to love and pray for everybody, including our enemies. That's why this charge of anti-Semitism, it's outrageous, absolutely outrageous, and it's a false paradigm that's being created in the secular liberal world. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This is a reaction to Michael Matt, a great video by Michael. Please check out The Remnant, subscribe, and check out what he does. I think he has one of the most concise voices for Catholics out there. He perfectly contextualizes the struggles of the Catholic Church, or at least Catholic community, and he has these solutions and the answers. He has a great historical context to all of these things. As you saw in this video, check out Michael Matt, check out The Remnant. He's a good guy. I want to thank you for joining me. This is Frank, sign off for Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.